Thanks, Jim. All right. Well, thank you. I am humbled and honored to be a part of, just in some small way, Christ Fellowship. So you guys have an amazing church, an amazing mission. I think it's awesome. I love what you guys are doing in the city of Miami. I definitely love what you're doing globally, trying to reach out and spread, the good news of Jesus Christ throughout all of South America. That really motivates me, and I think it motivates. I think there are a lot of people who are really turning an eye to, hey, what is going on globally? Like, how can we make an impact to a lot of people that don't have access to the same, stable currency, justice, all those type of things that we enjoy here in America, and Bitcoin is a part of that process. It's only a tool. God has unlimited tools to accomplish, His goals and His purposes, and we know that they will happen. I think that this is one tool that He is leveraging right now across the world, and I think it's a great opportunity that the Christian church should embrace and say, okay, how can we leverage this for the kingdom? So we talked a few months ago. We talked about how the church might be able to accept it, and Jim asked me if there were some people that were interested in just kind of, what does a personal investment, look like, and what are the reasons for that in Bitcoin. So I'll just share some of my mistakes that I've made along the way, some of the reasons that have kind of become more clear as I've spent time in the space, and then we'll leave some time if you got any questions. I'll try and define some of the terms that took me years to really understand. So we'll do our best we can in 30 minutes and leave you with some resources that you can look up later if you're more interested. But Hector, hit the next one. All right, so why cryptocurrency, right? Like, the dollar is good enough, isn't it? So the thing that, so what is it? What are we looking for, with money? What is it? Well, what I've come to understand is that money is simply a network, right? The reason that the dollar has value is because it's the largest network in the world, right? People use it to pay for oil, which, after 1971, we had Bretton Woods in 46, where the U.S. promised that the U.S. dollar would be convertible into gold. But then Nixon kind of changed that promise in 1971, and as the dollar started to lose a little bit of its network power, we were able to negotiate with the Saudis a deal that, hey, all of the world will only buy oil in dollars. And so that kind of secured the dollar's network, and the dollar grew, right? And so it became this global reserve currency, a very strong, very powerful network. And most countries of the world trusted it because, they can't change the amount of dollars that are constantly being issued, so it worked great. And it has worked great. It's been awesome for us as Americans, right? It's been a very stable currency. We can take our exports around the globe and be able to sell those for dollars. So that's worked great. Right now, kind of some of the questions as far as, well, is it a stable monetary? Is it a store of value? I mean, that's what everybody across the globe is looking for, right? I want to be able to work hard, save, earn some wealth, and be able to transmit that wealth both geographically. I want to send that to a friend, to a church, somewhere around the globe, but I also want to be able to transmit that wealth into the future, right? I want to be able to send that to myself or to my kids 10, 20 years from now. And what is a reliable monetary network that will enable me to do that? Well, we all know, we've all been told, right, that the dollar is depreciating, what we've been told at 2% a year. Well, as we've seen over the past year with the pandemic and the increase in spending, certainly brought a lot of questions into my mind. Well, is it really 2%? And everyone knows that you can't just leave your money in a bank account in dollars, right? Because A, it's not paying any money, and B, inflation is targeting it. So what is the big risk? Why cryptocurrency? Well, to me, it is because I see there are risks, right? I'm trying to hedge the risks so that I can send my wealth into the future. And the risks are inflation. So the more dollars that come out into the market, the less the dollars that I have in my bank account are worth. And over time, that is going to eat that away. But Why is inflation so critical at a time right now? It's because, well, obviously our government, our lifestyle, households, corporations, we're all addicted to debt. And the amount of debt, what this chart is showing is that the amount of debt has continued to increase. You probably can't read it right now. It's just for graphical purposes. But what you can see at the top is that Japan is currently running about 350% of their total debt when you combine government debt, household debt, and corporate debt is about 350 times what they produce annually, so their annual GDP. The U.S. total debt ratio is about 250 to 300% currently, right? So we're heavily, heavily indebted. Why is that increased risk? So with more debt, why is that increasing risk? Well, because any change in interest rates, right? If the interest rates are to go up, then you are going to lose more of your capital in paying off of that debt. So that is why we have seen, the Federal Reserve has continued to maintain a very low interest rate, right? In savings, what are we making? About 0.0. I'm not making anything in my savings account. I remember, I used to have a money market account, and I could make 4 or 5%. There wasn't that much incentive for me to go looking for different alternate stores of value when I felt I can do nothing and make 4 or 5%. So as with any creditor, you go and apply for a home loan. They want to see what are your total assets to liabilities. So the more liabilities you have, the greater debt you have relative to your assets, the higher the interest rate that you're going to pay because you're a greater risk to the bank. So in the same way, I kind of look at, well, okay, anything that's dollar denominated is exposed to more risk as the U.S. government's debt increases. And that's just, I'm not faulting any spending. It's just kind of the reality of the way things are right now. This is purely just a personal, how do I look out for my family talk, right? So the real inflation rate, it's been said that it's 2%, right? That's what we're told. Inflation's running about 2% per year. Just hit the button there, Hector. But looking at this chart here, I took this one yesterday. This is from the Federal Reserve chart. And I can send you the links to all these. But what this blue line here shows is this is the amount of currency in circulation. We can see 1 year ago in March of 2020, the total amount of currency in circulation was $1.8 trillion. The blue line, you can see a dramatic spike up, and as of March 2021, we're sitting at about $2.2 trillion of currency in circulation. This is from the Federal Reserve website, right? What that translates to is 25% increase in the amount of currency. So you can debate, there's lots of debate, well, what is the inflation rate? Well, the Federal Reserve, and they do a lot of work, and the CPI is what they call it, and that takes into account only a certain number of factors. But if we were to look at certainly housing or medical costs, you go to the grocery store, you go to McDonald's, you know that the inflation rate is, for those type of items, is running much higher than 2%. So if, for the things that you're interested in, if it's running anywhere near 24%, like the amount of currency in circulation is gone, then you need an asset that is going to give you a 24, 25% return if you're going to preserve any amount of wealth, right? So even if you make a 15% return in the stock market, effectively, if you're measured against the amount of currency in circulation, you've lost wealth, right? So that's where the interest for me has really continued with in looking into a cryptocurrency, right? There has to be something like, certainly the dollar is great as a unit, as a medium of exchange, right? The prices can be relatively stable over a short-term basis. I can know that if I want to save for a car and I need to buy it next month, the prices aren't going to change by 10 to 15%, right, month over month. But as far as a store of value, we can admit that the dollar is not going to cut it, right? And then, for me, just looking at stuff like this, I'm like, okay, well, sure, I do own some stocks and some investing and things like that. But if I'm looking at how do I beat 25%? Well, that's that's hard to do, it's seemingly, without taking on a little bit more risk. And so that's where I started this whole journey into cryptocurrency. Corporate debt as well. Many corporations, in as far as, yes, as the stock market has gone up, so has the amount of debt that each business corporation have been taking on, and that just exposes them. It's more risky now to put money in the stock market when the companies are so highly leveraged, right? So, and that's just a function of how I see. I think the biggest bullet that I can emphasize here is as debt goes up, risk goes up. Okay, next slide. So, cryptocurrency, right? There are many different options. Go ahead and build this one out for me, Hector. Right? We've all heard of probably Bitcoin and Dogecoin and Ethereum, and there are literally thousands out there right now. Is that working still? Keep building. Go ahead and just build these. So now, as you're evaluating, you're like, all right, well, this is crazy, right? There are too many. How do you pick? How do you know which cryptocurrency should I look to store any type of value in? Well, for me, what I look at is I know that if I know that that money is essentially a network, right? Where do I want the least amount of risk? I want it to be in the biggest possible network, right? The US dollar is the biggest network. It's accepted globally. So in the same way, I look at Bitcoin as it is the largest network. If you look across the entire world, there are more exchanges for Bitcoin as opposed to any of the other cryptocurrencies, right? You can look at the total. So Bitcoin's been around the longest as far as just a short history. We don't know who originally developed Bitcoin. A guy named Satoshi Nakamoto, an anonymous developer, had started working on it, worked on it for about 2 years, and just left the project, right? We don't know exactly why. It was only trading at a few dollars per Bitcoin at that time. Other people have taken it on. It's just kind of grown in a decentralized manner over the past 12, 13 years to where it is today, where we're talking about Bitcoin in a church cafe. So why has it grown in so much value? Why has it spread the fastest? Well, I think the biggest piece for me is that Bitcoin is inelastic, right? A lot of central bankers will talk about that we need an elastic money supply to be able to respond to shocks in the economy. Well, what that means is that when there's a shock, we want to be able to print more money so that we can save the people that are heavily in debt, but that's going to hurt the people who have savings, right? And to me, I don't have any debt, and that seemed unfair, right? So I was looking for a cryptocurrency that is going to tell me there is this fixed amount, there's this fixed supply. So whatever you buy right now, your percentage of the total supply of this currency will never change, right? And that's what Bitcoin is. It's inelastic, meaning that there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin in existence. And how do I know that? I was talking with Jim just before. So in the original code that was released back in 2009, that's what it was programmed for. And Bitcoin follows a schedule in that there are a certain number of Bitcoin that are released to the network every 10 minutes, and every 4 years that supply is cut in half. So we can look out and we can chart exactly, in the year 2140, the last essential Bitcoin will be released to the network, and there will be no more Bitcoin, right? So it is very inelastic. It will not change. As we see with a large market correction, nobody's coming to save Bitcoin. Nobody's going to print more Bitcoin in order to stabilize the value. That's why it's volatile, right? Because it's very inelastic. Over the short term, that has big penalties. Over the long term, it has great rewards. It's immutable, right? So picture, as we were talking, well, how do you know there will never be more than 21 million Bitcoin? It's the same way as I can have assurance that you cannot, change John 3:16, right? Because I have a copy of the Bible in my house, and I've memorized that Bible verse, and there are copies of the Bible throughout the entire world, and for you to change John 3:16, you would have to erase everyone's memory. you would have to go and take their copies of the Bible and burn them all and produce, a new copy of the Bible and send it to everyone else. It's the same way with Bitcoin, right? There are copies of this Bitcoin code that have been shared throughout the entire globe, and I have a copy on a computer at my house as well as millions of other people throughout the world. If you wanted to change the supply, you'd have to go around to every single person and convince them, either by force or by, or by encouraging them to do it, to change your code so that instead of 21 million, we need 30 million now, right? But I'm never going to do that, right? And so the whole game theory dictates that it's not going to happen at this point. It's decentralized, so there is no corporation, there's no head, there's no central bank for Bitcoin that can change anything like this, right? You can ban Bitcoin in China, you can ban Bitcoin in India, but the network's just going to keep working. It's like the internet. It's a protocol. It's not a company. It's a protocol, right? So you can't ban the internet. You can't cut it off because the internet is peer-to-peer, right? I can, establish a connection with Jim and send him an email over what is it? Apple's iSharing or AirShare or whatever, right? So AirDrop, exactly. So it's decentralized. It has first mover advantage, and that's really important, right? It has what I would say is impossible to stop momentum at this point. So it's very mind-boggling. Bitcoin has been the fastest asset in the history of the world to get to a market capitalization of $1 trillion, right? So it took Google and Amazon about 20 years to do it. It took Bitcoin 12 years to do that. It just hit, it's pulled back from there, but it hit $1 trillion in March or February or wherever that was, and that was the fastest asset to ever do that. As well as incredible, as you probably heard, the country of El Salvador, for a currency that's only 12 years old, has declared that Bitcoin is now legal tender in El Salvador just a few days ago. So that's incredible amount of momentum that all of these other coins, do not have, right? So as you're looking at, let's just take, for example, Dogecoin, right? So Dogecoin was started as a joke about 3 or 4 years after Bitcoin. I would say it's largely decentralized, right, in that there's no real head of Dogecoin, but you've got Elon Musk, who's calling himself the CEO of Dogecoin. But in Dogecoin's code, there is no maximum amount of Dogecoin that could ever be produced. It's infinite. It produces about 10,000 Dogecoin every day, and it's going to do that for perpetuity, right? So to me, that is not a stable long-term store of value. I want something like we talked about that's inelastic and that is fixed supply. It's the same thing for Ethereum. Ethereum, if you're looking at it, has issues with decentralization. There's an Ethereum Foundation. The founder and creator of Ethereum is a guy named Vitalik Buterin, is very much still in charge of Ethereum. They have changed the issuance rate of Ethereum multiple times over its only 6-year history. They've done hard forks, which means they said, we're changing the code completely, and everyone needs to download the new code if they want to participate in the network. And they're planning to do that again next year. They've got this big upgrade, but it's going to be what's called a hard fork, so it's a mandatory change that is dictated by the foundation, right? So that is not very decentralized, meaning that, so as far as trust, there's more trust involved in a cryptocurrency like that, that you're going to have to trust them that they're not going to increase their issuance rate more in the future. Okay, we talked about momentum. Go ahead and hit the build the next one there. It's peer-to-peer, right? So a government can say they're going to ban it, but you can't stop, Ray and I from, airdropping a file right now, even if it's banned. Like, you can't stop that. So in the same way, you can ban it, but you can't stop people from transacting in Bitcoin at this point. Now, what this shows, this little quick video, it's programmable. What this video shows, go ahead and hit it, Hector, is now imagine trying to pick, like, okay, yeah, Bitcoin, I've heard it a million times. Bitcoin is like MySpace, right? And Ethereum is like Facebook, or Bitcoin's like Facebook, and whatever Dogecoin is like Google, right? What this shows is, look at all these coins at the bottom, like they go up and down, right? And you're telling me you're gonna try and pick the winner. Like, I tried, like I dabbled back 4 or 5 years ago. I bought all these weird coins. I remember telling a guy in 2016, I was like, I'm done with Bitcoin, right? It's too frustrating, it's too slow, it's not advanced. But that was before I kind of realized all these other characteristics on the left. Now, thank goodness I sold out of all of those other coins, and I just went only with Bitcoin because I started to learn that for all of those reasons that I just talked about, it is going to be very hard to pick. It's going to be very hard to unseat Bitcoin first, and nearly impossible to pick which one is going to do it. Okay, go ahead and hit the. Any questions? Please stop me at any point if you got any questions on any of this stuff up to this point. Ray.
I got a question.
Yeah, man.
So traditionally, like in regular stocks,
Yep.
what drives the price up or down is news and earnings.
Yep.
So that's the part that I'm really confused. Like, what drives the price up or down? Because I'm looking like at a chart of Bitcoin.
Yep.
February was here, then up, and we're back to where we were in February. So whoever got in just lost all their money.
Yep.
Between now and February.
I'll talk to that. I've got a slide on that, so I'll talk to that.
Yeah, so repeat the questions for the video.
Yes. So the question was, what drives the price of Bitcoin, and we'll get to that. I do have a slide on that. So any other questions about any characteristics about the other cryptocurrencies or anything like that? Okay. So what is Bitcoin, right? It is a financial ledger, right? Financial ledgers have been around for millennium, right? This is probably a Middle Ages financial ledger, just a book of Chris owes Ray $10 and Ray owes Jim $10. That's a financial ledger. That is all that Bitcoin is. It is an online decentralized ledger. Now, what happens with Bitcoin is people will make a transaction, right, with their phone or their computer. They will broadcast this transaction out over the internet to the network, and that transaction will be recorded in the blockchain. So what the blockchain means is that every 10 minutes what you have is a new block that is found by the miners. This part gets a little bit complicated, right? But what happens is you have all these miners. You've heard about Bitcoin mining, right? They're not actually digging into the ground, right? What they're actually doing is they're just these computers that are trying to solve a very complex puzzle that changes over time. So if one of the computers solves the puzzle, it raises its hand and says, I've solved the puzzle, and now all the other computers can prove that that computer actually solved the puzzle, and that computer can broadcast out the next block, right? So what it does is it says, okay, I'm taking all of these transactions that were awaiting to be included in the blockchain, and I include them in the next block, and I get to write myself a check for 6 Bitcoin. Right, which times whatever $36,000, you're talking $240,000, something like that. So that is the incentive for miners to buy energy and put computers to trying to solve this complex problem. Now, what that does is that provides the network with security, right? In that if you wanted to change this financial ledger, you can't just go and obviously line through it with a pen. You would have to have enough computer, they call it hash power. You would have to go buy enough energy to have more energy and more computers than 51% of the Bitcoin network, right? Which, the total energy estimates right now is that Bitcoin consumes more energy than like the nation of Ireland or a lot of power goes into this. So it is impossible. That's why it's immutable, right? Very difficult. Once that transaction goes through, you can't change it, right? It's virtually impossible to change at this point. So that's why Bitcoin is so that's one piece of why Bitcoin is so valuable, in that it has the highest grade security of, and it's trustless, right? In that you don't have to trust anybody else because it's decentralized, right? And we'll talk about you're participating in a global network, and that brings some of the value, but we'll talk through the kind of prices here in a little bit. All right, next slide.
Hey, Chris.
Yep.
Was that what Elon was fussing about over the last month, right?
Yeah,
the energy crisis had to do with the amount of computers and the power.
That's what he's talking. Yeah, so he's saying, oh, this is terrible for the environment, right? That Bitcoin consumes all this energy. It's producing all this CO2 emissions. He's missing a big piece of this. Well, one to me, the energy that Bitcoin expends to give 8 billion people across the world access to a store of value that cannot be changed, and that 70% of the global population cannot have a bank account and has no access, to people in El Salvador or in Colombia, that don't have access to the stock market. They can't buy index funds and things like that. How are they going to? And their inflation rate is much, much higher than what anything we experience. So how can they, from the work they're doing, how can they transmit their wealth into the future? Like, they don't have that. This is something that Bitcoin offers, and I think, the energy that is expended on it is well worth providing a service like that to people around the globe. As well as, the other big point he misses is that, nobody's going to bail out a Bitcoin miner, right? So what they have to do, they're incentivized to find the cheapest energy source possible, right? So if you can't mine Bitcoin from home because you're paying maybe 50 cents per kilowatt hour, and you're just not going to be competitive. You're going to be spending more on your energy use than you'll be getting in Bitcoin to mine. So they have to go find the cheapest energy sources possible, and a lot of that is they're using stranded energy sources like at hydroelectric dams that produce more energy than are being consumed, solar power plants. The president of El Salvador has just issued his country has a lot of volcanoes, and they're using geothermal energy to run turbines, and he wants to use that energy to power Bitcoin mining. So
these aren't home computers?
No, you have to buy what's called an ASIC. So it's a very specialized computer that its only job is to mine for Bitcoin. So, huge, millions and millions of these computers have been produced already, and more are being produced every day. All right, so how does it work, right? Some of the key concepts that were confusing to me at the beginning is, so you have Bitcoin wallets, right? And you have private keys, addresses, and public keys. So think of Bitcoin as just in a bank where you've got lots of safety deposit boxes, right? Now, you want to be able to put some wealth in a safety deposit box. That safety deposit box you can think of as an address, right? So just like an email address or something like that, you can get a Bitcoin address, you can generate one for free online, and now what you have is you have an address that people can send Bitcoin to. Now, in order for that to be valuable to you, is you have to be able to unlock that safety deposit box and move it from your safety deposit box to someone else's in order to be able to execute a transaction. So in order to unlock that safety deposit box, you need a private key, right? A private key is it's a cryptographic kind of fancy word for just a very, very long password, right? And it is something that you have to safeguard, that if it's exposed on the internet or anyone else has access to it, then they can unlock your safety deposit box and spend your Bitcoin and put it somewhere else. So that's what a private key is. Now, a wallet I think of as just like the ring on a keychain, right? A wallet can contain many private keys, right? And a wallet can give you access to many different addresses. And we'll talk about some of the wallets that are out there, right? You can have a wallet on your phone, you can download a wallet to your computer, or there's custodial wallet solutions. So that's kind of a broad overview. Anybody got any questions on those specific terms? All right, go to the next one. All right, so the types of wallets. We talked about this briefly. So you have, I think of it in three terms. You have a custodial wallet. So let's say you just went on to Coinbase, you used a username and password, you sent some dollars to this Coinbase exchange and bought Bitcoin with it. Now, you don't actually have a private key, right, in order to unlock Bitcoin on the blockchain and send it to someone else. This is a custodial solution. Coinbase actually maintains the private keys for that Bitcoin. You're just trusting Coinbase that when you log in, that you can, when you buy more Bitcoin, Coinbase just changes it on their ledger. That, okay, I could send Bitcoin to Jim while on Coinbase, and it doesn't get broadcast on the blockchain, it just on Coinbase's ledger. They will make an entry, say, okay, Chris has half a Bitcoin less, and now Jim has half a Bitcoin more, right? So that's a custodial solution. You can also have a hot wallet, right, where you download a wallet from the App Store on your phone, and now you can quickly generate addresses and receive and send Bitcoin on your phone. That's a hot wallet because your phone is always connected to the internet, meaning it's less secure in my book, right? So there can be bugs in your phone, there can be malware listening or transmitting your private keys. So I use hot wallets, but I don't use large amounts of money on a hot wallet, right? I use it for demos. If I want to show people how Bitcoin works, I got a couple dollars. I can kind of see it as your hot wallet would be like your checking account, right? You're going to put, a couple $100 and you're going to go to the grocery store and you're going to spend money on a hot wallet. The other option is a hardware wallet where this was my progression, right? Like I didn't start on the far right side. When I started with Bitcoin, I started with a custodial solution, just username, password, and I'm going to let a third party store Bitcoin for me, right? And then as I progressed, I've progressed on this continuum. But you can now buy for about $50, you can buy these hardware wallets, and what they do is they store that private key for you in a chip inside. It looks about like a thumb drive, and that chip never has access to the internet, right? You can plug it in via USB device, and it will sign and authorize. It will unlock those safety deposit boxes for you and authorize a transaction without that private key ever being exposed to the internet. You can't download malware or viruses to a hardware wallet. That's why those are valuable. Okay. Next.
Chris, on the hardware one,
Yeah.
what if let's say, that USB stick breaks?
Okay. We're going to talk about that one. I got a slide on that one too. So if that breaks. All right, so this is perfect. Thanks for the transition, Hector. You're the man. Pay you later. All right, so as far as security, right? So I talked about your private key. Now your private key, as you can see here, this is this I just generated on the internet really quickly. This is a address. This is what a typical Bitcoin address looks like, right? 1 JAV, long string of numbers. Nobody memorized this, just copy paste in order to send a transaction. And then this would be the private key, another super long string of numbers that would take you several trillion years if you were just to randomly try and guess the private key. Now, that is more prone, people realize that, hey, if I want to make a secure copy of this private key, there's a possibility I might make a mistake copying it down, right? And I don't want to lose it. So what most companies follow now is they call it a passphrase. So when you create, whether it's on your hardware wallet or on a hot wallet on your phone, it'll say, okay, I'm about to give you 12 or 24 word passphrase, right? And it'll be words just like this, which, collapse, practice, etc. And it'll tell you just to write down these words, right? And what these words represent is it's a passphrase that can be translated into the private key, okay? And this passphrase is very important. This is the thing that when you make a wallet, this is what you have to spend your time thinking about. How am I going to make sure that this is so secure that nobody can get this information from me, and yet I'm not going to forget it or lose it myself, right? So this is probably the more complex part of Bitcoin. So the big keys, the important parts of Bitcoin security, right? I talked about Bitcoin is final, right? If you lose it, you lose your key, you can't find it, you can lock yourself out of it, or somebody steals it, right? It's gone. Nobody's going to refund you. There's no, if you're storing it yourself, there's no insurance. Now, if you're doing a third party, Coinbase, they have insurance for this type of stuff. So it's all dependent, right? Now, how do I go about, thinking about internet security when I'm dealing with Bitcoin? The first thing is two-factor authentication. That is very, very important. So whether you have an account with Coinbase or Robinhood, you need to think about like just a username and password is very low security. What I recommend is there's many Authenticator apps. Google Authenticator app is probably the best that I've seen. in that it will generate a 6-digit numerical code for you, and once you type in your username and password, it'll ask, type in your Google Authenticator code, and then you type that in. Now, why is that more secure than like having an exchange send you a text message with a number? Well, there have been attacks where people have called phone companies and said, hey, my name is Debbie Sutton. I've changed my service provider. I'm now with T-Mobile instead of AT&T. Like, you don't sound like Debbie Sutton. Oh, I'm sorry, I've got a cold. And they will change the provider, and now this attacker has Debbie Sutton's number, and maybe he's got your password, and he logs in, and they send their password recovery to Debbie's old phone number, right? So that has happened. So that's why something more like a Google Authenticator app is very important. When you're talking about passphrases, right? So if you had Bitcoin and it generated a passphrase, this is never anything you would ever type into a computer. You would never do a screenshot. You would never copy it on a printer or anything like that, right? Like, you begin to get a little bit paranoid about security. So what you do, the best thing to do is just to write it down on a piece of paper. Some people go extra lengths and they chisel it into a piece of steel that can't be burned or whatever. I write it down on a piece of paper, and I put it in a safe in my house, right? And I take another copy of it, give it to a friend or somebody that doesn't live with me in case my house burns down or whatever, right? So that if that hardware device, if it breaks, my kid steps on it, spills Pepsi on it, then I just buy another hardware device. I type in my passphrase into that device, not into the computer, and now I have access to all my Bitcoin, right? And this is what is so powerful, I think, about this technology, in that, you talk about, all these people who are having to flee their countries for immigration, right? They can literally memorize 12 words. They can walk out of the country and be frisked and searched for, are you taking any valuables with you? No. They walk into a computer lab in the next country, and they restore all their wealth, that is a powerful, powerful tool to give to the immigrant population now. Store your backups securely. So I talked about that, right? Having a plan of where you're going to keep these backups, on paper and things like that. Next slide. Any questions on this stuff? Like, Ray.
So what's the disadvantage of just using Coinbase?
So the disadvantage is you got to trust them, right? So exchanges have been hacked, right? So Coinbase had a really good record that they haven't been hacked, but other exchanges have been hacked, right? So when you think about, so where's the biggest target for a hack? Well, it's that it's an exchange, right? They have a lot more Bitcoin rather than, it's much easier to hack $1 million from an exchange than 1 million different users that each have $1, right? As well as, regulatory risk. So who's to say that, I think that's what happened with these hackers that hacked into the power or the gas company, right? And they requested the ransom, and the ransom was sent probably to an exchange or something, and the government, was able to freeze them out of that account, right? Because, they didn't store it. I don't know. Lots of questions around that whole story, but
But it's not, because you said it is insured, but I guess to a
Could be.
certain degree it's insured.
yes.
So if it gets hacked, I'm good.
Maybe, yeah, you'd have to look into that, right? So different custodians, provide different insurance policies. They'll insure up to a certain amount. Again, I'd have to look in and see what their specific insurance policy was. But yeah, that's where I would start. I would start with a custodian service, but I think, where you want to go is, I think you can limit risk as you start to learn and progress, that you would want to host it yourself because you're eliminating counterparty risk, right? I don't have to trust Coinbase.
You're also paying a fee of 1%
Yeah.
for them
To do the transaction.
you bypass that.
Yes, so there can be fees associated with that as well. Okay, so historical returns, we'll talk about a little. Go ahead and build this first slide here. Just click it. All right, so all right, that's fine. So anyways, what this is showing, right, is this is just showing that, yes, when Bitcoin started, it was worth nothing, right? Some guy bought 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin, which would be worth several $100 million today if he'd have just held on to it. So what we see with Bitcoin is that it, to me, it's amazing how predictable it's been, because what happens is, I talked about, every 4 years the supply, that the issuance of Bitcoin is cut in half. So I talked about every block the miner gets to write themselves a check for about 6 Bitcoin right now, and then the miner spends that Bitcoin, and that's how Bitcoin gets out into the network, right? So every 4 years, that amount that they can write themselves a check for gets cut in half. So in 3 years' time, it's going to be reduced down to 3 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. And then 1.5, et cetera, until it's virtually nothing, right? Well, this has been going on for 12 years. So what you see is that whenever these halving events happened, so this one happened in 2012, right, in November. And then what we see is, so you have a large supply shock, and then the price starts to get more volatile, right? Like, the demand was roughly the same, but now the supply has been cut in half, so it starts getting more volatile, and eventually it just explodes in volatility, and normally it's been to the upside, right? As even if demand stayed the same, the price is going to have to at least double, but just because of network effects and all these kind of things, it ends up doing more than that, right? So the price exploded. This is when I first got involved. Price was trading about $100, and I bought half a Bitcoin for $50, and it shot up to $250. I was like, sold! I just made $100, And I thought, this is such a bubble, what a joke. And then sure enough, yeah, it went up to like $1,200, and I couldn't believe it. And I was like, the only way to make Bitcoin go down is for me to buy more. And then sure enough, like it dropped, and it dropped 80 to 90% down to $100, and I'd forgot about it for about 3 years or so. And then in 2016, I started looking at it again, and it's back around $400. This thing's not dying. And so then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to put $100 a week into it. And so I started doing that, but I only did it for 3 months. I was like, that's probably enough for right now. And so I stopped. But then, and hit the next slide. So then so this actually happened in July, about here of so it wasn't this line. About July of 2016, we had another halving, right? So the supply was cut in half, and then as you can see, volatility started increasing until the point where, things went vertical, and it shot all the way up to $19,000, and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm loaded, and then of course it dropped again, aggressively, but fortunately I didn't sell any this time. I held it, from $19,000 all the way to $3,000, and that was a real gut check. I was like, whoa, I've lost a good bit, but I had spent a lot of time now researching and learning, and I thought there's something that's very valuable to a decentralized, immutable, inelastic network, that is global at this point. So I just held on to it. And then hit the next slide. And so then where we are right now, you can see, it's very similar pattern, right? So it's very stable, for about the last year or two, finds some stability, and then we get a halving event, and then bam, this is where we are today, right? So it's just, volatility has increased, the price has gone, much higher than it was last year. It's come down it's come down, 40, 50% from where it was, 3 months ago. So yes, it is volatile. Go ahead and hit the next slide. So as you were to zoom out, so if you zoom into Bitcoin, it looks crazy, right? It's like this, but if you zoom out, it looks like this, right? It just, and that is a very different change in perspective. So we'll talk about the challenges. It is volatile. Go ahead and build this out. So daily swings of 10% are not uncommon. So what I would say is kind of the first rule of Bitcoin is it is the riskiest investment to pursue short-term goals, right? Do not touch Bitcoin if you are thinking, I'm going to get rich tomorrow or whatever, right? It is only suitable for something, I think, beyond 4 years, right? If you're looking, beyond 4 years or long-term, me personally, I think it's the best long-term, lowest risk, highest return investment for a long-term investment objectives. How do you time it, right? When's the right time to buy Bitcoin? I have no idea. I've bought Bitcoin, like I said, as low as when it was priced at $90, and I've bought it as high as $59,000. Not buying whole Bitcoins at that price, obviously, but buying a couple $100 at those different prices because I have no idea where Bitcoin is going to be in the short term. And but what I do know is that I do feel very strongly that over the long term, it's just going to continue to go up. So the common meme is that the best day to buy Bitcoin was yesterday. The second best time to buy Bitcoin is today. So don't ask me if now's a good time. I have no idea. I just buy it regularly. Okay. A lot of challenges, new concepts, new vocabulary in tech. We've talked about some of that stuff. Again, I'm around. If you have more questions, I'm happy to answer those. Perception, it's around for, it's only used for drug dealers and terrorists and ransomware criminals. I hope you don't associate me with any of those people. But that is the perception. We talked a little bit about regulatory risk, right? That what if Elizabeth Warren put out a tweet just yesterday that she wants to ban it or make it incredibly hard. She's a very minority voice in Congress right now. Jose and I actually met with a senator at the Bitcoin prayer breakfast last week, senator from Wyoming, who is very pro-Bitcoin. And there was a representative. I didn't know he was a congressman, and I asked him to take a picture of Jose and I. So I felt pretty dumb afterwards. Like, hey, would you take our picture? But so there are at this point. There are some very pro-Bitcoin people in government, and so to think that, hey, they're just going to ban it, especially in the U.S., is I think very short-sighted.
Well, the mayor of Miami is.
Yeah, the mayor Francis Suarez is, he was the lead speaker of the Bitcoin conference here in Miami last week, and he is.
So what would drive it up or down? What is it news?
Who knows? It's a global network. It's a global marketplace. So there are, like in the short term, I have no idea. There's a million different factors that drive the price short term, right? I don't care short term. Like long term, what drives the price is the halvings, right? That it is a limited fixed supply that nobody controls. That's the long term price driver, and that it's a global network at this point. That's the long term. Short term, I have no idea. Yeah, there's.
Maybe it's because competitive, because now the Dogecoin or whatever. I thought maybe that's what drove it recently down. That there's talk.
It just, it's a speculative market that is impossible to regulate and control. My theory is that, you can regulate and try and, get rid of market manipulators and things like that. What I think happened is you had a lot of people that were heavily leveraged in Bitcoin, meaning they borrowed a lot of money to go long on Bitcoin, and then you had, some very wealthy investors that saw an opportunity, right? If we crash the price and we're short Bitcoin, we can make a ton of money. When there's so much leverage in the system, all they do is they may have a lot of Bitcoin, they go onto the market and they click market sell, and that triggers, all of these liquidations, and that drives the price down, 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 and they were short, so they make a lot of money on the short sale, and now they can rebuy Bitcoin at a lower price.
So how do you convert it back to dollars?
Okay, so I'll talk through that. So just using an exchange, right, in Coinbase. So if you have like a Coinbase account, and you buy Bitcoin, you can keep it in Bitcoin, and if I wouldn't advise it, but if you get scared, then you can sell it back to dollars and send the dollars back to your account. Okay, it's final. That's a challenge. We talked about that one, right? That it gets stolen, you send it, you sell it, and then the price doubles the next day. You're like, dang it, can I have a do-over? No, right? That's it. All right, next. No returns. Government regulation, we talked through some of that. Next. Some of the pitfalls, all right? So human emotion, right? This is the biggest one, right? I fell for this one a lot. Go ahead and build this one, right? Volatility amplifies your emotions, right? So, I was like, oh, yes, I'm wealthy. And then, bang, I'm like, oh, no, it's going to zero. I better sell it now, right? And fortunately with time, I've become a little bit more, I'm not immune to volatility and emotion, right? There's still, those common fears and greed, right? But you just have to recognize that fear and greed drive you to buy high and sell low, right? And that's just common to human existence. It's always been that way, but it's more amplified with an asset that is short-term volatile like Bitcoin. So if you can't deal with those type of emotions, I would not recommend any investment in Bitcoin. There's the scam coin lure. I call them scam coins because I don't think they offer the same value that Bitcoin is, right? And you'll see, I did it for a while a couple of years ago, right? It was like, oh, Bitcoin's only made 20% this month. That's ridiculous. Litecoin made 100%. Like I'm gonna put money in Litecoin, and then Litecoin goes down and Ethereum goes up. Oh man, I should put money in Ethereum, and right. So that's caused people to lose fortunes in money. And what you see over time is that people are like, man, all this trading, all these strategies. If I'd have just bought and held Bitcoin and done nothing, I would have, saved more wealth than if I'd have been trying to do all these complex strategies. So that's a little bit of the scam coin lure. Is yes, over a short term they may show that they've got greater returns than Bitcoin, but over the long term, I don't think it's certainly not been the case long term. Security, that we've talked through that risk. Hopefully, I've emphasized that enough. Don't type your private key into your computer. Don't copy it on a copy machine or a scanner. And then an inheritance plan. Does somebody else know how to access? If you've gone beyond this custodian option, do you have a plan that somebody can access your Bitcoin if something happens to you? So that's another common pitfall. All right, next one. Next step. So here's, if you were interested in, how would you get started with Bitcoin, right? So that would be something you'd have to discuss all this, and Jim can give you access to these slides if you want to look at them. You'd want to talk with your family. Make sure, this is something I didn't do as well about this preparing my wife for the volatility and things that were involved with that. And so it's taken time, but you want your family to be on board with everything. You'd have to talk about, okay, well, what allocation percentage of our total wealth portfolio are we comfortable with, right? So that all depends. It depends, to me, it depends on those three factors below, right? How comfortable are you with volatility, and what percentage would you be comfortable with the volatility that we've already seen with Bitcoin? What is your knowledge of security, right? You're certainly not going to go 100% into Bitcoin on your first day, because there's a high risk that you probably lose your private key or something like that. And then what is your access to other inflation hedges? Do you have a great financial planner? Is he doing better than 24, 25% in the stock market, et cetera, right? Then you probably have much less incentive to look into Bitcoin than somebody in El Salvador that their currency has been inflating at 50% per year, right? Well, not El Salvador, but another country, Zimbabwe or something like that, Venezuela. They have very high incentive. They don't have access to a lot of other things. So those are factors that I think determine that you'd have to think about, okay, what is a good allocation? And you'd certainly want to start lower and learn about those three things, and then you can increase that percentage over time. I don't do any allocation balancing, right? Where some people say, okay, well, if I always keep it at a certain percentage, then that helps adjust. For me, I just buy into it and I just leave it there. So what that has meant for me over time is that my allocation percentage of my total portfolio has grown over time, right? So, and that's just something you'll have to decide, what's best for you. Then the next thing you'd want to do is, once you've kind of talked about this, you got a game plan, at least you can register with an exchange. There are hundreds of exchanges out there, at least the two that I would recommend. I think Coinbase and Swan Bitcoin, I really like. Swan Bitcoin is Bitcoin only, which makes it a little bit more simple in my book. So I like that, but I've used Coinbase for the longest time. You create an account, you link your bank account and details to Coinbase, and you say deposit. I want to deposit $500. You deposit $500, and then you can just say, I want to buy Bitcoin with that. And then you'll buy Bitcoin on the market, and now your account on Coinbase will show you own, 0.01 Bitcoin or something like that. Okay? So that's the whole process. Then if you wanted to go, yep, go ahead.
Can you use the Lightning Network with Coinbase?
No. No. Yep. So when you want to withdraw, so what he's talking about is, if I wanted to withdraw from Coinbase, which I do, right, because I trust myself, more than a third party, then I hit withdraw. Once I bought my Bitcoin, I withdraw it, and I withdraw it to my own hardware wallet that I keep, at home, right, that I have backups for and all that type of thing. But there are other there's a whole nother, we can get into like the Lightning Network and stuff later, but the Lightning Network is a second layer protocol on top of Bitcoin that allows for instant, fast, and virtually free transactions and things. But there's just so much development, and that's kind of what goes along with the momentum of why Bitcoin has so much more developers than any of the other cryptocurrencies out there. And then the next step is definitely become a student of digital security. I can give you plenty of resources to keep you busy for the next couple hundred years as far as the amount of podcasts and books, and there are courses online if you want to learn more about digital security and things like that, or the philosophy or the economics behind what sound money or limited supply of money, how that is good for you personally and for an economy. Is that it? Go ahead and hit one more. Hector, yep, next. Okay, so yeah, there's some additional resources on here. So sorry that took me a little bit longer than I was hoping, but I'll be around if you guys need to leave. Please
Let me just
go ahead.
Go around this. We, as of yesterday, we do now have Bitcoin. Can you go to that slide there, Hector, to our website? We've added this phrase to our giving page that you can give online, to our giving page by credit card, debit card, Apple Pay, which is about to come online with us as well, and Bitcoin or ACH. And then go ahead and go to that page. This isn't the final look, but this is what's there now. We're still tweaking with that with the buttons, but now you can begin we can begin receiving, and that's the receipt you get when you give a Bitcoin contribution. And so Chris working with Debbie and Hector and Brandon have we really I think we're one of the few churches in the country that are able to do this now.
Yeah.
By the way, when Chris came to us, and offered his help to get us set up, I immediately emailed ECFA, Warren Bird, the Senior Vice President of ECFA, who also is my co-author of 2 books with me, longtime friend. I also wrote Generis, the leading company to help churches with raising money, who Julie Bullock works for, and asked them, as well as what's the other? Mike Bass. You did him, and then also I talked to what's the other one? Other big accounting firm.
Oh yes, but I can't.
Okay, just went blank. It's based in Colorado, but who we used for many years in my church. The big accounting firm. I asked all those companies: is Bitcoin and cryptocurrency a viable vehicle for financial transactions and receiving? All of them wrote back and said it is a viable form of asset giving, which is very important about that is not cash giving. It's like stock, how our government sees us as stock, which means you can transfer Bitcoin directly to us and not pay a capital gains tax on it. And so that's a huge asset to a huge opportunity for people in Bitcoin, like Chris. Chris had been trying to talk the family into getting into Bitcoin for years, and we all thought he'd lost his brain, he'd lost his mind. What are you crazy? It's terrorists. It's all this stuff. And I wished I would have listened to him a few years ago. I'm in now a little bit, but I'm really thrilled that we as a church are able to do this. And as mentioned, our mayor of Miami, Mayor Suarez, he wants to be the crypto city of the world. And he is pushing hard to make, to establish this, wants to even start making payroll in Bitcoin and for the government employees and the city employees, all that kind of stuff. But he's become a huge voice and advocate for that, and so as well.
Yeah, you think about the transition. I mean, this to me, I think it's a bigger transition than what happened when the internet. I was talking with Daryl. She was telling me about, when the internet started coming along, it was terrifying about email. How do I do email? And she hired somebody from church, right, to just show her how to do an email. And this is going to be a similar type of transition, I think. I mean, it's coming, right? Like,
so how many of you are invested in any way? Is anybody who's not? I should say who's not. Maybe that's not okay. So you're considering it. It's a different mind, a totally different paradigm. I didn't understand. I asked your question, right? Well, what I thought you were buying it. It's a product or something that you buy and sell. it's just a totally different. I think
Yeah.
you described it the first time. It's kind of like gold 2.0 gold.
Yeah.
What makes gold so valuable? It's limited, even though that
Yeah.
can be increased some, but not easily.
Yes.
But so it's kind of like that. It's like digital gold, isn't it?
Yeah.
Gold bars.
And that was I think that's very, so if you talk about like, well, Amazon was Walmart 2.0, right? In that, Amazon's total, market value has, 10x'd what Walmart, ever thought, they could be. In the same way, that's kind of how I look at Bitcoin relative to gold, right? I mean, gold's worth 10 trillion now. Like, you're talking about something that is more scarce than gold, more transferable, more easily securable, right? And has a larger global decentralized network than gold ever could. So I think it's, its possibilities for market cap size it's going to do the same thing that Amazon did to Walmart.
And as I've been learning about this as well, is that there are people who don't like this at all. Like Warren Buffett is against this because his whole, life has been invested in the stock market. Last year, I saw the stat. In 2020, the stock market did have good growth. What was it, about 20% or something?
Yeah. Yeah,
But
about 20.
Bitcoin had 300% growth. So, but there are other government leaders or politicians and all who are strong advocates. I know the state of
Wyoming
is
Ohio,
full
Florida.
on that. And so, Florida for sure. But so it's out there now. You cannot pull it back in. And so you can. There is some. You can get a tax deduction by donating Bitcoin. So those protocols are in place the same way as stock is. And Debbie, anything else you want to say about our process here and how this works?
Just to let everybody know that this is Chris's gift to us, that he wants to further the kingdom and help the church in growing other ways to receive income and to reach out. He's helping us get these steps. I mean, he's not getting anything for this. So I really appreciate your time and effort to educate us. I don't know how, I think we need to start a club or something. Because it is very complicated. And
Yeah.
I can see, just like the analogy of email, we will figure it out.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Debbie.
I think I know another big part of his motivation is the ability, what we're doing in South America, and the ability to really help get funds to our projects, our churches across South America and other places, which right now we have no means of getting into Cuba
Or Ukraine.
or Ukraine.
Oh, really?
And so we could do this, but our government doesn't allow us to do this yet. So,
Yeah.
And Bitcoin is happening in Cuba.
We did. We sent
We sent $1.
No, we sent him $100. We sent Arcady $100 in Bitcoin like that. He got it instantly, and he was able to trade it, use it, spend it.
But then our board, 2 bankers on our board, said, we can't do that. We're technically not supposed to do that. And so we're working on other ways we might can do that. So in a way that's permissible. But yeah, we see the implications. Daphne?
I just had a question. Of all of the other electronic, type of Bitcoins or things like that, are there any others that are like Bitcoin in its elasticity and its...
No, like, the way not for me, right? The way I look at it is if you put 50 people speaking 10 different languages on a spaceship and you send them out to Mars and they come back 10 years later, how many languages are they going to be speaking? 1, right? Like, that's how money, that's the process of money, is that it gravitates and centralizes because it has to be a unit of account, a medium of exchange, and it's a network, right? Eventually, one network overpowers them all. And I just see that Bitcoin has the largest advantage, and it is the most decentralized, most inelastic. The main competitors, so the next biggest one is Ethereum. The next biggest one, I talked about Ethereum doesn't have a maximum supply count. The network doesn't have the immutable characteristics of Bitcoin. Then, certainly Dogecoin that's come up in the last, few months, no maximum supply count, no real development going on. So for me, no, I don't buy anything else besides Bitcoin. Now, when you talk about, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. Well, to me, Bitcoin is when I'm getting that diversification when I buy Bitcoin, because buying Bitcoin means that I'm investing in the Salvadorian electricity complex that's now mining Bitcoin in, with volcanoes. And I'm also investing in the African who is selling goats for, he's got goat sales, but he accepts Bitcoin for it. So I'm getting that diversification of a large global network in just buying Bitcoin directly. So I don't look at, I need to buy all these other coins for diversification. That's a good question. Any other questions? That's just my theory. Obviously, there are people that that would disagree. So do your own
as I
research.
mentioned, Chris, it was a gift that he's here for 2 months in his training,
3.
and then it ended up being 3 months because they had so many pilots and not enough simulations. They're going through the pipeline. But that has been a gift to us here at the church because we just this week I guess finally got it all came together in terms of all the technical side of getting this done. And so it was a gift to us, but my wife, my daughter and her, and the other 6 children, they're ready for him to be home.
Yeah.
My daughter did come out a couple weeks ago, just as a experience this year, and they will be coming back. They'll be coming back every year for a couple of times a year for training for a few days each, and maybe even if you're an instructor, you might be here for a month or two, a couple months.
Yeah.
So Christ Fellowship has become their home church when they're in Miami. And they're wrapping up. He's wrapping up now. His time in the Air Force. His last assignment has been in Columbus, Mississippi. Anybody ever been to Columbus, Mississippi? But they're moving to Reno, Nevada.
That's right.
They're going to be living here, and they're building a house there now. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. Thank you, Chris.
No, thanks.